Hi, I'm David Nazar in for Rick Reef. Welcome to Inside OC. We're going to spend the next half hour dissecting the Kelly Thomas police beating case from all angles. We'll hear from Kelly's father, a Fullerton city councilman, a Fullerton website disclosing new details daily. We'll also hear from the district attorney, the Orange County Rescue Mission specializing in caring for the homeless, and a psychiatrist specializing in schizophrenia. But first, an outpouring of criticism and demands for accountability are tearing through the county in a story that's gone global. Nick Gerda has the background.
Stop the violence! We won't be silent! Stop the violence!
Hundreds gather to protest the death of 37-year-old Kelly Thomas, the homeless schizophrenic man who was brutally beaten by police officers on July 5th. Thomas died 5 days later. This demonstration in front of the Fullerton Police Department, one of many protests over recent weeks, again draws a crowd of hundreds, again denouncing the actions of the police officers involved and the lack of response from the department and city officials. Back on the 5th, officers were dispatched to the city's transportation center to investigate reports of a man attempting to break into cars. Thomas was ID'd as a suspect. And then, the altercation between Thomas and 6 Fullerton cops.
I saw 2 cops on top of a homeless guy right here that I know. And they were pretty much beating him up, telling him to stop resisting, and then more police came and they started beating him with a flashlight, backup flashlight in the back of his head. And he wasn't moving around at all, but more came and they started tasering him, and it was just a horrible sight. The guy wasn't moving, had his arm in front of him, and his head was down already, and he wasn't moving at all, and they just kept going.
The attorney representing the 6 officers claims Thomas was combative and the officers did not use a taser excessively. The beating was captured by this nearby surveillance camera. It's uncertain right now just how clear the images are. The Orange County District Attorney's Office and the FBI are investigating. The DA's office now has the video, but will not release it. However, there are 2 other videos circulating. A bystander at the nearby bus depot caught the incident on his cell phone, and that video has been all over the internet. The other video is of eyewitnesses reacting to the beating as they board this bus.
Slammed his face against the curb with red, and they beat him up. There's 2 other cops came, tasered him 6 times.
Justice for Kelly!
This protest reflects the overwhelming concern among Fullerton residents that the city and the department still won't give answers. Answers a community is desperate for. In Fullerton, Nick Gerda reporting.
One of the many issues of concern, the department's initial decision to keep 5 of the 6 officers on street duty after the incident. The Fullerton cops weren't reassigned until 3 weeks after the altercation. All are now on paid administrative leave, and many are calling for Fullerton Police Chief Michael Sellers to resign. A quick note. When this story first broke, I began contacting the Fullerton Police Department and subsequently called every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. We offered Chief Sellers a spot on the show with all the time he wanted to tell the department side of the story, information that may be out there that we're not hearing about, information that could show there are, of course, 2 sides to this story. The department, I'm told, was considering the interview and finally decided against it. The invitation, of course, is still open for Chief Sellers. Now here to talk about this case, Ron Thomas, father of Kelly Thomas. Bruce Whitaker, Fullerton City Councilman, and Chris Thompson, a Fullerton School District member, also representing the website fullertonsfuture.org. Thank you all for being here. Yes. Your first reaction to that story, I've heard you say it's murder by cop. Are there things we don't know, or you still believe that, Ron?
I absolutely believe it's murder by cop. I'm very objective. I'm very open-minded. When I listen to the witness statements, I have them, I've read them over and over. When I listen to the tapes, that horrifying audio, seeing my son in the hospital, looking at the MRIs, the x-rays, this is absolute murder. There's no doubt about it. The injuries are to his head. You don't apprehend somebody by the head. There was no attempt there. They wanted to kill him.
In fairness to the cops, in fairness to the department, what could be a motive there? What could have caused them to do this, looking at this as objectively as you can as a caring dad?
Well, looking at it objectively, I certainly don't believe this is normal behavior by a police officer. I've always said, and I still contend, this is a group of rogue cops. I do honestly believe they were trying to send a message to the rest of the homeless people, get out of Fullerton or you're next. I think that was a motive in it.
Bruce, maybe that's the point. We direct this to you. As a city official, council person in Fullerton, what can be done so this doesn't happen again? Let's advance this story. Can you implement policy change? Why not have Fullerton be a prototype or a model, if you will, so this doesn't happen across the country ever again?
Well, we can't change what happened in this tragic event, but we can learn from it. And I believe there are times and certain situations where moral outrage is an appropriate response. I believe that our city has reacted, unfortunately, in a weak way to what's occurring, and I think the beginning is to admit that there could be a problem and set about solving that problem, identifying what it is. But certainly all my efforts are going to go into prevention of anything like this in the future.
Even though we're in sort of the formulative hour, if you will, the infantile stage, what can you tell your fellow city council folk as far as procedure or policy?
Well, right now my city is being presented to the world as 5 cardboard cutouts and a faceless, heartless bureaucracy. That's not the city that I know, and that certainly isn't the intention of the people who elected me to office. So while we may receive legal advice that we have to be somehow removed from our humanity in dealing with this, I reject that, and I think there's a better way of approaching it, and certainly grieving appropriately along with someone who's a victim is part of that process.
You are one of the top officials in the city. What do you tell Chief Michael Sellers, who has not come forward, who was not in front of this story when it happened?
Well, I only regret that I didn't move very quickly myself. I felt that perhaps it was the chief of police or the mayor's proper role to get in front of this. That didn't happen. I attended the memorial for Kelly Thomas. I heard the pain from Ron Thomas expressed up there, and I realized I'm in a position to maybe make a difference for other families, other events in the future. That's what I intend to do. It's hard for me to understand how my council mates can choose inaction.
Yet people are still angry with you, as you know. Why did it take so long for you?
Well, the initial reports that we got were not as, at least contextually, maybe as accurate or as thorough or as relevant to what the information that I would need, that I would seek in this case. He was in a coma initially, and then when we got word of his death, I saw that the memorial was planned, and there was no way I was going to miss that memorial. My wife and I attended, and I've tried to be as constructive on both sides since that moment. I put out a letter early requesting the release, open letter to the residents of Fullerton, requesting release of all audio and videotapes. It's something that I think the public has a right to see.
Hasn't happened yet. Chris Thompson, you've been taking the lead with Fullerton's Future, helping break stories daily. Where are we at? What is the latest in this case?
Well, I think the latest is what we're going to be talking about today. I'm waiting for some elected official or paid official in Fullerton to actually be transparent about this. I think Bruce and Sharon Quirk are being managed by insiders in the city of Fullerton and the Fullerton PD, and I think there's a lot of questions about what's really happened with this investigation. We're hearing that it may be the case that the officers were allowed to view the video that we have not been able to see prior to and in conjunction with their reports. What's the actual validity of their reports? I think that we're not getting the true story as to when the DA was brought into this thing, and I think I'm amazed at the lack of transparency that we're hearing out of the DA's office with when they were brought in and what their intent is, and so the latest is what appears to be more hiding of the truth.
Given that's the case, what are you efforting? Do you want to see a recall of city council members? Do you want Chief Sellers to resign? Where are you at right now?
I would say both of those things are absolutely necessary. We have begun and noticed 3 of the city councilmen, Don Bankhead, Mayor Jones, and immediately past Police Chief Pat McKinley. We're going to recall them because they, either through an absence of comment at all or direct comments on Chief McKinley's part, advocating that the police department itself control the release of that video, we need for the elected people who manage the police department that have allowed this to occur to pay the price of losing their jobs, so that not only the city of Fullerton can begin to recover, but so that all over the country, elected bodies that manage police departments know that the price of not being transparent with the people is losing your job.
You are not family to Ron or Kelly. You are not a friend. Why are you so angry over this?
Tony Bushala, who owns Fullerton's Future, called me up and briefed me on the story, and we went down to the site, met Ron, and interviewed Ron at that time. That interview appeared on the blog. And Ron pulled out his iPhone and was kind enough to share with us the picture of his son, Kelly, in the hospital. And Tony and I looked at each other, and that was it. You just could not fabricate a justification that included reasonable force that led to that photo unless Kelly were armed or the greatest karate expert in the history of mankind.
Speaking of that, Ron, you saw our story at the beginning of this show. I'm sorry we had to show that to you. You hear your son calling out for you, crying out for you on an emotional level. What did you think when you saw the story now, weeks later?
Every time I see that, it just tears me apart. I hear him cry for me every day, every night, and it really tears me apart. To hear city officials, district attorneys, even the coroner's office have doubt, suggest that maybe the officers won't be charged, if so, to a very lesser degree. These types of things is sickening, absolutely sickening. They need to know that I'm not going away. This fight will be here, absolutely be here, and I'll back it with all the facts that I have to continue this.
It's almost unimaginable to figure out what you're dealing with for folks who obviously have never gone through this. What kind of pain are you in?
It's moment to moment. My emotions run the gamut every day, every moment. I try to stay extremely focused. That's what I have to do for Kelly. I've had to put my grieving and mourning for him aside. That'll come. But for now, I'm just absolutely focused on getting justice for him.
Chris, earlier you mentioned about the district attorney. I spoke with Tony Rackauckas earlier about this case. Here is part of my interview with the Orange County District Attorney. You've heard the complaints from the public. Some are saying the fix is in, that the DA is not going to be proactive. There are differing accounts as to when you got this case. Your office says that you received the case about 2 days after the incident. Police are saying that they forwarded this to you only a couple of hours after the incident.
We need to wait until we're asked to investigate. They asked us on the 5th, they asked us on the 7th to investigate, and we immediately began the investigation at that point.
And between then and now, have you spoken with any of the police officers involved?
As far as whether or not they've talked to each and every police officer who might have been involved in the incident, no, not each one, but certainly many of the police officers who were involved or closely aligned with the circumstances.
Why not release the videos to the concerned public?
This is a item that we have that's a major investigative tool that we have at this point, and so it's not something that we would normally do. We wouldn't release a video of the incident before everything's in. So we need to have our witnesses make their statements beforehand. If charges are filed, of course, then it would be a public trial. Everything would be public. All of the evidence and everything that we use to consider and to bring charges would become public. And if that doesn't happen, if charges are not brought, I will release a very detailed explanation as to all of the circumstances and the law and the reasons.
Has your office ever prosecuted a police officer, a law enforcement officer, for a shooting death or a custodial death?
During the time that I've been the district attorney, my office has not prosecuted a police officer for a shooting by a police officer resulting in a death. As far as a custodial death, we had a circumstance with a beating death that took place in the jail. We did a major investigation and report on all of the details of that, and there were some prosecutions that came as a result of that, but no police officers were charged with homicide as a result of that.
There are reports circulating that the police officers involved in the beating death were actually able to see the video prior to them writing their police report. Do you know anything about that?
Generally speaking, we prefer that our witnesses, whether they be lay witnesses or police witnesses, don't view a video of the scene or the circumstances, and then just give us their report. But whether or not they did here, I don't personally know. I know they did have that in their possession.
Chris, with Fullerton's Future, quick reaction on that interview.
My reaction is thank God for First Amendment rights. I do not have faith that these governmental agencies will do their best for exposing the truth without the scrutiny of blogs and aggressive media. I just hear him posturing to circle the wagons and protect their own. I'm not feeling good about what I just heard.
Bruce, what about you?
I've been interested in accelerating the results of investigations throughout the course of this, and it's imperative, I believe, that videotape be made public at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later. The public's right to know what really occurred here is paramount.
Ron, this is your district attorney speaking out.
Yeah, I think it's pretty pathetic what he's saying.
What specifically?
Well, again, it sounds like he has no intentions at all of filing charges, and he's setting up the public to prepare to accept this. What I need to do is really ask of the public to put a lot of pressure on his office. What I've done thus far with the city council, the police department, and one-on-one with the chief in a closed door, I'm going to do the same thing with the DA. I'm going to request a one-on-one with the district attorney myself.
Thank you. There is a bigger issue here, of course. I spoke earlier with Jim Palmer, the executive director of the Orange County Rescue Mission. His organization has been dealing with the homeless population for nearly 50 years. Here's part of that interview. How is and how has been the relationship between cops and homeless in this county?
We're overall very lucky that law enforcement spends time in educating themselves on homeless situations, on domestic abuse situations, on mental health situations. But all departments don't have the resource or maybe the focus to do that.
Having said that, then, what went wrong with these cops?
Well, the challenge you see in Fullerton is a number of police officers trying to subdue a very small person that's having a lot of issues. And I think from what we hear is the community is very upset that why so many police officers had to literally physically put a person down. We won't know the results until later, but I can tell you that we don't see that happen too often in the police departments that invest a lot of energy into educating their officers on how to deal with these individuals in our society that there doesn't seem to be a home for, in a sense.
Going forward, what can the police do, or what can your organization do working with police so this never happens again?
Well, to attack this particular situation, you're dealing with both mental health issues and homelessness issues. So becoming educated and being able to set up policies and procedures that support the police in dealing with these situations. The real tragedy in our community is we all call the police department to be social workers. I was on a recent ride-along, and all 6 calls we went on were social work kind of calls. So we really need to give the resources these officers need and the training they need to understand how to deal with this. And as communities, the more we can each do for our neighbor, I think the better off we are.
Neighbor helping neighbor. We continue with our discussion on the Kelly Thomas death. Now joining Ron Thomas and Bruce Whitaker is Dr. Gustavo Alva, a psychiatrist who specializes in schizophrenia. Doctor, thank you for being here.
Quite the contrary. Thank you for having me here.
I offer the question to you. Obviously, mental illness is a tremendous component both in Kelly and many of the homeless. Talk about schizophrenia and the role it plays.
Well, first and foremost, my condolences, because this truly is a tragic story that encompasses a serious problem that we face in our communities. Really a lack of an understanding of serious mental conditions, medical problems that have treatments and have ways of actually being countered is really what's at play here. When we talk about somebody suffering from a medical condition and then subsequently a misidentification of certain things and then subsequently a lashing out onto certain behaviors is a great example of where we need to have greater sensitivity, greater education, and a greater understanding about many of the medical problems that we face right now.
Doctor, I'm told that these officers need at least 16 hours of a minimum requirement in mental health training, if you will, as they deal with these homeless folks. The police department is not telling me whether these officers involved in the beating had that training. How important is this training, or is it simply just a panacea?
Well, it's critical. I think that many of the things that, for example, the Orange County Medical Association, the Orange County Psychiatric Society have attempted to do is really to create educational programs for, again, governmental agencies and, again, the local public for a greater understanding of things like schizophrenia, for example. If you've got somebody that's homeless, that could be as a consequence of a serious mental condition that brings about certain problems in that individual being able to figure out whether something's real or not.
Well, quickly, we can't solve the world's problems, but what do you say to the police then who did this? What is the answer when you deal with mental illness, which is such a grave component of this?
First and foremost, not vilifying mental conditions, and then subsequently not jumping onto situations that could actually be harnessed or could actually be tempered down through an appropriate approach. So having a solid backdrop in regards to how to handle situations that might be escalating rather than jumping on and actually utilizing physical force.
Ron, we're running low on time. Wasn't there anything, and I almost rhetorically say this, that could have been done for your son? Obviously, he's diagnosed early with schizophrenia. He showed signs early on as a young man. You probably went to Herculean efforts to try to help this person.
Absolutely. For years and years and years, we've always helped him. In and out of boarding cares. He's had his medication. He would be doing fine. And it was always, Dad, I feel fine. I don't need the medication. Well, that's the vicious cycle. It's like, well, you're feeling fine because of the medication. And then they walk. And they're free citizens of the United States. There's nothing else you can do, and it's heartbreaking. But years of trying to help him.
We know what the police did not do. We know what society did not do, if in fact it fails the homeless and the mentally ill, which I suppose it does, to be honest. Let's be fair. In fairness, what did you possibly not do as a father trying to help your son?
I really don't know. I mean, I went to such length as I would get a call that he was in a park in Yorba Linda. I drove and got him. I took him to a lockup facility in Santa Ana, a psychiatric facility. I physically, as his conservator at the time, I could do this. I physically had to put him in an arm hold and get him through the door into a lockup facility. I mean, that's tough love, and people are always, where was the dad? They just don't know. They just don't know.
I don't know what to say, except we do wish you the best, most definitely. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org and clicking on Inside OC. My guests have been Ron Thomas, Bruce Whitaker, Chris Thompson, and Gustavo Alva. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again inside OC.